My name is Barbara, and I'm the oldest of two daughters. From as far back as I can remember, I've always been the serious one, the independent one. My sister Michelle was the exact opposite. Growing up, our house was always full of noise. Michelle's laughter, mom and dad doting on her, and the constant buzz of pop songs playing in the background. Me? I preferred quiet corners, my nose buried in a book or working on my homework. Birthdays and holidays always made it clear how different Michelle and I were. She'd tear through her gifts, squealing with excitement over trendy clothes or the latest gadgets. I, on the other hand, carefully set aside any money I received. "What are you saving for this time, Ratchet?" Dad would ask, a hint of pride in his voice, though his eyes showed he didn't fully understand. "A laptop for studying," I'd reply. "The library computers are always busy." He'd nod, but I could tell they didn't get why I didn't want what other girls my age did. Michelle was a whirlwind of new styles and endless demands. "Mom, did you see the new iPhone? Everyone at school has one. I need it," she'd say. And just like that, she'd get it. No questions, no saving. I remember the day I finally bought my laptop. I'd saved for months researching the best model. When I brought it home, I was bursting with pride. "Look, I finally got it," I announced at dinner. Mom glanced up from her plate. "That's nice, dear." "Oh, Michelle, tell us about your day at the mall." And just like that, the conversation shifted. Michelle dove into a long story about her shopping trip, and my achievement faded into the background. It wasn't that they didn't love me. I knew they did in their own way. But Michelle was the sun in our family's solar system, and I was a distant planet quietly orbiting on my own path. As we got older, the differences between us only grew. Michelle experimented with wild hairstyles and followed the latest fashion trends, while I stuck to my practical ponytail and comfy jeans. The library became my safe place, a quiet sanctuary where I could focus on my goals without distractions. When it came time for college, I poured all my energy into applications. I spent countless nights perfecting essays, researching scholarships, and studying for entrance exams. When I got my acceptance letter with a full scholarship, it was one of the happiest moments of my life. I ran into the kitchen waving the letter. "Mom, Dad, I got in with a full scholarship." Mom glanced up from helping Michelle with her makeup. "That's nice, dear." "Michelle, hold still. I'm trying to get your eyeliner just right." Dad looked over his newspaper. "Good job, Barbara." We expected nothing less. Their lack of excitement hurt, but I was used to it. I went back to my room clutching the letter. This was my chance to finally leave, to prove myself. Meanwhile, Michelle barely made it through high school. The day she brought home her poor report card, I thought our parents might finally be disappointed, but instead they surrounded her with support. "Oh, sweetie, don't worry," Mom said, stroking her hair. "College isn't for everyone. You have so many other talents." Dad nodded. "That's right, Princess. You'll figure out your path." I couldn't believe it. "Are you serious?" She barely passed. Mom shot me a sharp look. "Barbara, don't be mean. Your sister has other gifts." I bit my tongue and walked away. No matter what I achieved, Michelle would always be their favorite. College was a fresh start. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who appreciated hard work and ambition. I threw myself into my studies, determined to make the most of this chance. One day in my second third, I got a call from home. It was Michelle, her voice bubbly as always. "Rach, guess what? I'm thinking of taking some beauty courses. Mom and Dad think it's a great idea." I wanted to tell her about the research project I was working on or the summer internship I'd landed, but I knew she wouldn't care. After hanging up, I felt both frustrated and motivated. I was on my own path, and I was going to make it count. Years passed quickly. While Michelle jumped from one beauty course to the next without finishing anything, I graduated with honors. I got a job at a top company even before my diploma was dry. Moving into my own apartment was a bittersweet moment. As I unpacked my few belongings, I thought about how different my life was from Michelle's. She was still at home, pampered by our parents, while I was standing on my own, ready to take on the world. The first few months at my job were a blur. I worked longer hours than anyone else, determined to prove myself. Within a year of hard work, I was promoted to team leader. Excited, I called home to share the news. Mom picked up the phone. "Oh, Barbara, that's nice. But guess what? Michelle met the most wonderful boy. He comes from such a good family. We're all so thrilled. As she went on about Michelle's new boyfriend, my promotion seemed to disappear into the background. I hung up feeling deflated, but it only made me more determined. If my family couldn't value my achievements, I'd just have to achieve even more. I threw myself into my work with everything I had. Days turned into nights, and weekends became extra opportunities to get ahead. My hard work paid off. One promotion led to another, and before long, I became the youngest department head in the company's history. One day, Mr. Paul, the company owner, called me into his office. "Barbara, your work has been outstanding. We've never had someone rise through the ranks so quickly," he said with a smile. "Thank you, sir. I love what I do," I replied, beaming with pride. "And it shows," he said. "That's why I want to offer you something special. We have a program for top employees, a chance to buy an apartment at a significant discount. You've earned it." The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork and planning, but when I finally got the keys to my new apartment, I felt like I was floating. I decided to host a housewarming party to celebrate with the people who mattered most. Since I didn't have much furniture yet, I bought some inexpensive plastic tables and chairs and set everything up with care. Even the disposable tableware matched the decor. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine, and I was proud of it. On the day of the party, my colleagues arrived first, bringing thoughtful gifts and warm congratulations. Then my family showed up. Mom, Dad, and Michelle came in like a whirlwind. Michelle's eyes darted around the room, taking in the modest furnishings. I caught the smirk she tried to hide. As the evening went on, I noticed a pattern. Every time one of my colleagues congratulated me or brought up my accomplishments, my parents would quickly change the subject to Michelle. "Oh, that reminds me," Mom said, cutting off one of my coworkers mid-sentence. "Did Barbara tell you about Michelle's latest modeling gig? She's just so photogenic," Dad chimed in. "Yes, our Michelle was born for the spotlight. Such natural talent." I saw the confused and slightly uncomfortable looks on my colleagues' faces as the focus shifted from my achievements to Michelle once again. I wanted to disappear into the floor. Michelle, on the other hand, soaked up the attention. "Oh, Mom, stop it," she'd say with a giggle, clearly enjoying every second. Finally, thankfully, my family left. The moment the door closed, my coworker Laura turned to me, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Barbara, what the hell was that?" she asked, her voice low and concerned. I shrugged, trying to brush it off. "Oh, that's just how they are." Another colleague, David, shook his head. "No, Barbara, that's not normal. Are you okay? Do you need help?" A lump formed in my throat. Their concern was touching, but also embarrassing. "Guys, really, it's fine. I'm used to it," I said, forcing a smile. "Who wants another drink?" As I busied myself in the kitchen, I could hear them whispering, their worry obvious. I blinked back tears, refusing to let them see how much my family's behavior had hurt me. After that disastrous housewarming, I buried myself in work again, determined to move forward. The months flew by, and slowly I turned my apartment into a home I could truly be proud of. Every piece of furniture, every splash of color on the walls was a reminder of my hard work and independence. One sunny Monday, I decided to treat myself to something I'd been saving for: a car. It wasn't flashy, just a reliable sedan to get me where I needed to go. As I drove it home, a wave of pride washed over me. This car was mine, bought with my own money, a symbol of everything I had accomplished. I had planned to tell my family, but news spread fast. That evening my phone rang, and Michelle's cheerful voice came through the speaker. "Rach, I heard you bought a car." "That's nice," she said, though her tone made it clear she didn't mean it. You're really doing things the hard way. All this working and saving. It's so unnecessary." Her words made my stomach tighten. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Well," she said, as if explaining something obvious, "the main job of a woman is to marry properly. Find a man who will take care of you and give you everything you need. Why work yourself to death when you could have it all handed to you?" I was speechless for a moment. Was she serious? "Michelle, that's not how I see things. I want to earn what I have. I'm proud of what I've accomplished." She laughed, a light tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. "Oh, Ratch, always the difficult one. Well, you'll see. I'll show you how it's done." Before I could respond, Michelle had hung up. I stared at the phone, feeling a mix of anger and disbelief. How could we see life so differently? A few months later, I got my answer. Michelle called, her voice full of excitement. Barbara, you'll never guess. I'm getting married. His name is Nicholas, and he's absolutely loaded. His parents are paying for everything. The wedding's going to be stunning. As she went on about the dresses, flowers, and guest list, I felt an emptiness inside me. This was what she had been working toward, her idea of success. The wedding day came faster than I expected. I stood in a grand hall surrounded by glittering guests feeling out of place. Michelle looked radiant in her designer gown, and our parents couldn't stop beaming with pride. I sipped champagne, trying to swallow the bitterness building inside me. Had my parents ever looked at me with such pride? Had they ever been this happy about anything I'd achieved? As the night went on, I felt more and more like a stranger. Michelle thrived in the spotlight, charming the guests and soaking up the attention. Our parents introduced themselves to everyone, proudly announcing, "We're the parents of the bride." On my way home, driving my modest car back to my modest apartment, I couldn't help but wonder if I had made the wrong choices. Was Michelle right? Had I chosen a harder path for nothing? But then I thought about my job, my achievements, and the pride I felt knowing I had earned everything on my own. No, I decided. My path might be harder, but it was mine that made all the difference. After Michelle's wedding, life settled into a routine. Work kept me busy, but my mother's calls became a regular and unwelcome interruption. Every conversation followed the same pattern. "Barbara, darling," Mom would start, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "You won't believe what Michelle's been up to." I'd brace myself as she launched into another story about Michelle's fabulous life. She's been invited to the most exclusive events. Can you believe it? Our Michelle rubbing elbows with high society. One day, after an especially exhausting call, I couldn't hold back anymore. "Mom, that's great for Michelle," I said, frustration leaking into my voice. "But don't you want to know what's going on in my life?" There was a pause, then Mom said in a patronizing tone, "Oh, honey, of course we care. But you really should learn from your sister. Be more glamorous. Why work so hard for so little when you could have it all?" A few weeks later, I received an invitation. Michelle and Nicholas were throwing a housewarming party for their new luxury apartment, a gift from his parents, naturally. The night of the party, I stood outside Michelle and Nicholas's building, feeling small. I smoothed down my simple dress, took a deep breath, and walked in. The apartment was breathtaking. Every surface sparkled, and every piece of furniture looked like it cost more than I made in a year. My parents were already there, marveling at every detail. I tried to stay in the background, but Michelle spotted me almost immediately. She walked over holding a champagne flute, her eyes scanning me from head to toe. "Barbara, so glad you could make it," she said, her tone sweet, but her gaze critical. "I hope you're taking notes. This is how a housewarming should be done. None of that plastic furniture and disposable dishes nonsense like at your place." My cheeks burned. "Michelle, that's—" But she didn't wait to hear the rest, already flitting off to dazzle other guests, leaving these standing there with the sting of her words. In the weeks that followed, Michelle seemed determined to flaunt her lifestyle at every turn. She bought the most expensive things, clothes, jewelry, you name it. Then came the car. One evening after work, a sleek sports car pulled up beside me. The window rolled down, and there was Michelle, her face smug. "Like it?" she purred. "Just a little gift from Nicholas. Thought I'd take it for a spin." I glanced at my plain but dependable sedan. "It's very nice, Michelle." She followed my gaze and laughed. "Oh, Barbara, always settling for less. You'll always be working for others while I live the good life." Her words stung, but I didn't let her see it. 3 years passed in a blur of spreadsheets, meetings, and promotions as I climbed the corporate ladder. Meanwhile, Michelle seemed happy hopping from one shopping spree to another. Our lives couldn't have been more different, but I'd learned to accept it, or so I thought. Then on an ordinary Saturday, everything changed. Mom called, her voice shaky. "Barbara, it's Michelle. She's back home. Nicholas left her. He said she's too shallow, too focused on spending his money. He called her stupid. Can you believe it? And she signed a prenup. She has nothing." A wave of emotions hit me. Shock, concern, and, if I was honest, a tiny flicker of vindication. I quickly pushed that feeling aside, ashamed of myself. "I'm coming over," I said, already grabbing my keys. When I arrived at my parents' house, it felt like stepping into a war zone. I could hear Michelle screaming from the driveway. Inside, it was chaos. Michelle was in the living room, mascara streaked down her face, her designer clothes disheveled. She was throwing anything within reach, vases, picture frames, cushions. "He can't do this to me," she shrieked, her voice raw with anger and despair. "I'm Michelle. I'm beautiful. I'm perfect," she cried, her voice filled with rage and tears. Mom and Dad hovered around her, trying desperately to calm her down. "Sweetie, please," Mom pleaded. "We'll figure this out. Dad will buy you a new dress, won't you, dears?" Dad nodded quickly. "Of course, Princess. Anything you want." I stood there watching this strange scene unfold, feeling like I had stepped into an alternate reality. This couldn't be how life was supposed to work, could it? As the days passed, Michelle's tantrums didn't stop. She'd cry for hours, then scream, then demand expensive gifts to make herself feel better. And our parents, eager to keep her happy, gave her everything she asked for. One evening, after another meltdown, I couldn't hold back anymore. "Maybe," I said carefully, "Michelle should consider getting a job. It might help her appreciate the value of money and give her something to focus on." The room fell silent. Then all at once, chaos erupted. Michelle's face twisted in anger. "A job like you? Slaving away every day like some peasant," she spat, bursting into tears. She ran upstairs, slamming her door so hard the whole house shook. Before I could even process what had happened, Mom and Dad turned on me. "How dare you?" Mom hissed. "Your sister's going through a terrible time, and you suggest she lower herself to your levels?" "I didn't mean it like that." I tried to explain, but they weren't listening. "Get out," Dad said, his voice cold. "Get out of this house right now." Mom pointed at the door. "Outside, and don't come back until you can be supportive of your sister." In a daze, I grabbed my purse and left. When I walked into my apartment, my sanctuary, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Sadness at being rejected by my family, anger at their blindness to Michelle's faults, and oddly, a sense of relief. For the first time, I saw how toxic my family had been all these years. Life has a funny way of surprising you when you least expect it. Just days after the blow-up with my family, I got news that left me stunned. I had won a company contest. The prize? A 5-month, all-expenses-paid cruise around the world. In a moment of weakness, or maybe hope, I decided to call my parents. Maybe this good news could heal the rift between us. "Mom, Dad, you won't believe it. I want to cruise around the world." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Then my mother's cold voice broke through. "Barbara, how can you be so selfish? Your sister's going through a terrible time, and you're bragging about vacations." I felt like I'd been slapped. "I'm not bragging," I said quietly. "I just thought I started, but Mom cut me off. If you had any decency, you'd give that ticket to Michelle," she said sharply. "She needs a change of scenery. You can stay home and work, like you always do." Something inside me snapped. Years of frustration poured out all at once. "No," I said firmly. "I won this trip. I earned it. I'm not giving it up because Michelle made bad choices. I'm going." The next few weeks were a blur as I got ready. I packed my bags, sorted out everything at work, and on the day of departure, I did something I'd never done before. I turned off my phone. For the first time in years, I felt free. The cruise was everything I had dreamed of. I watched stunning sunsets in the Malta, explored ancient ruins in Romania, and walked through the busy streets of Singapore. For 4 incredible months, I was just Barbara. Not the responsible older sister, not the family disappointment, just me. But all good things must end. When the ship docked back home, reality hit. I turned on my phone, expecting a flood of messages, but there were only a few missed calls from my parents. Feeling lighter than I had in years, I headed home. As I approached my apartment, I heard noises inside. My heart pounded. Had someone broken in? I opened the door cautiously, and there she was, Michelle. She was sprawled on my couch, surrounded by shopping bags and empty takeout containers. Michelle, I gasped. What are you doing here? She looked up, barely reacting to my sudden arrival. Oh, you're back. Finally. I stood frozen, my key still in my hand. How did you get in here? She rolled her eyes. Don't be dramatic, Barbara. I used the spare keys you left with Mom and Dad. I needed a change of scenery. Everything at home reminded me of. I stared at her, speechless. This was too much. I needed air. I'm going to the store, I muttered, grabbing my car keys and heading outside. But when I got to the parking lot, my car was gone. Panic set in as I called my parents. Mom picked up, her voice overly cheerful. Barbara, dear, how was your trip? Where's my cars? I cut straight to the point. There was a pause and then Dad came on the line. We sold it. The world seemed to spin. You what? Michelle needed cheering up, Mom said casually, as if it was no big deal. We used the money to take her shopping and to the spa. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. What I was hearing felt unreal. That was my car. You had no right, I yelled. Dad's voice cut in, stern and dismissive. Now, Barbara, we're family. What's yours is ours. Don't be selfish. Something inside me snapped. Years of frustration, resentment, and anger poured out. Selfish? You stole my car, invaded my home, and I'm selfish. I want my money back, now. Their reaction was instant and harsh. They called me heartless, ungrateful, a disappointment. The words stung, but for the first time they didn't break me. I hung up the phone, marched back into my apartment, and found Michelle still lounging on my couch, completely unaware of the storm inside me. Get out, I said, my voice quiet but firm. Michelle looked up shocked. What? Get out now. She tried to argue, to manipulate me like she always did. But this time, I didn't budge. For the first time, I put myself first. The next day, I hired a lawyer and sued my parents for the value of my car. They were furious, threatening to disown me and cut me out of their will. But I didn't back down. The case went to court. It was exhausting, laying out years of emotional manipulation and financial abuse for strangers to hear. But in the end, justice was served. The judge ruled in my favor, and my parents were forced to sell their house to repay me. They moved into a small apartment, telling anyone who would listen that I was the villain who had ruined their lives. But for once, their words couldn't touch me. As I drove home in my new car, fresh from the dealership, I felt lighter. For the first time in my life, I was truly free. Free from their expectations, their manipulation, and their control. I made the difficult decision to cut off all contact with my family. The first few months were tough. There were moments of doubt and loneliness, but slowly I began building a life on my own terms. I poured myself into work and rose quickly through the ranks. I made new friends who valued me for who I was, not what I could do for them. I traveled, picked up new hobbies, and discovered things that brought me joy. Most importantly, I learned to love myself, to value my strength, determination, and worth. Now, as I sit in my office looking out over the city skyline, I can't help but smile. The path I chose wasn't easy, but it was mine. I built this life step by step, decision by decision, and I wouldn't change a thing.